Hey, Yetta, should we renew our title insurance?
No, we only want to buy it once per address.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward together with the Decker team.
So we're excited to welcome you to another episode of Life's Inside Track. I'm Yetta Decker.
And I'm Ken Decker.
And it's where we get to share techniques, thoughts, tips, tools, and some truths that we all need. We all deserve. You, I, everyone. So we can turn our house into home, our families thrive, and we live the best life possible. In this segment, we're going to consider how do you protect your home and I guess yourself with the right insurance.
Right.
And specifically, we're going to talk about title insurance right now. So, Ken, what is title insurance?
Well, title insurance is an insurance policy that you take out when you buy a property, and it covers you for unknown defects in title so that later on, if something happens, they will step in and cover it. So maybe it's your garage is partially on a neighbor's property.
And it wasn't known and it wasn't registered on title that way.
Right. And then what happens is they will then go to your neighbor, try and make an agreement, maybe give them some cash that they say, okay, it's allowed to be encroaching on my property. And then it would
it would be then registered on title.
That encroachment was allowed.
And then that's okay.
Right. Worst case scenario, they may have to pick up the garage and move it.
Right. And in the case, and we might as well share real stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
We had a person we were working with, and when they went to buy during the inspection, it was discovered that the septic bed was the majority of it was on a neighboring property.
Right.
And title insurance, fortunately, was purchased
by the seller when they bought the property.
Correct. Even though they hadn't done an inspection because they had bought privately and they didn't know to do an inspection at that time.
That's a great caveat, because if they'd done an inspection and found it was over, but then bought title insurance, it wouldn't cover them because it's now a known defect.
Exactly. They would have had to negotiate with the original seller to get either full compensation for a new bed or whatever. And I mean, these things don't happen often, but when they happen to you, you're sure happy that the right checks and balances, including the purchase of title insurance, was accomplished. Now, most of the time, the lawyer is going to facilitate purchasing that title insurance for you, right, at the time of purchase. And in this case, that did happen, which was
and that, awesome. That bed back then was 20 grand. It's about 30 grand now for a septic bed.
30 or 40.
And of course, the first thing title insurance tries to do is negotiate with the neighbor for an agreement that it can stay there.
Right.
And now if you had your neighbor's septic bed on your land, so there's...
Not me. He's talking to you.
Would you want to accept that? Probably not. And neither did this neighbor.
No, and sometimes people ask, well, how can that kind of thing happen? Well, originally, the two pieces of property were owned by the same person. It was severed. And at the time of severance, which was long enough ago, nobody happened to notice and nobody happened to inquire and nobody asked. And I think it was two different family members that lived in the two properties. And so it didn't really matter. But a very long, and it was never registered on title that the septic was on the wrong property. Because sometimes there is a well.
It wasn't the whole thing.
Well, it was 2/3.
So in this case, the title insurance paid for a brand new bed to be put properly on the land. And so it was a win-win. The buyer got a brand new septic. The seller didn't cost him anything to do it.
Right. And what Ken was attempting to say, and then I think I might have cut him off, what happens once in a while with us is that had they discovered it during the inspection, the original seller at that time really would have been responsible, or it would have been a negotiation point between the buyer and the seller. And maybe there would have been a sharing the cost, maybe who knows what the outcome would have been, because it's a negotiation.
Yeah. And sometimes things show up like, the lawyers do the title search and there's an old lien on the property, or somebody had a mortgage, that person's passed away, and that mortgage is from like 40 years ago, and it never got removed from title when it was paid off. Yeah. And so that needs to be cleaned up. So then title insurance is going to pay for the legal work to get that done. If
it happens when?
When it's found out after insurance is already in place.
Right.
Right. If it's found out before, then insurance won't cover anything that's a pre-existing problem. Or if something was built and it was built without a building permit, title insurance will not cover any deficiencies in that. You know, if it was built in the wrong place, the garage is over the lot line, but it wasn't actually got a permit to build it, then they're not going to cover it.
Right. So these are all things that maybe are nice to know if you're a current homeowner. If you're building something, you want to get the appropriate permits so that it doesn't come back to cause you grief down the road. And if you're thinking that you want to stay connected with us between episodes, what I was going to say, or want clarity, or get these kinds of tidbits ongoingly in your inbox, you want to email us together@deckerteam.com so that we can stay together as part of each other's community.
Right. And the beauty with title insurance is it's inexpensive, relatively inexpensive, right? It varies depending on the price of your property, but you're going to be somewhere between $300 and $800 for title insurance.
Generally speaking.
Yep. And then it's bought at the time of purchase. Now, the good news is there's certain things that your lawyer doesn't need when they have title insurance. They don't have to do some extra searches. And as a matter of fact, they don't want to do those searches because if they discover something, title insurance won't cover it. So there's several searches they don't have to do, which saves you a few $100s. Also, with the invention of title insurance, you didn't have to get a survey because you didn't have to prove that the property was in the right spot because now you had title insurance for that.
Right. So you may still want to get a hold of a previous survey because there's usually one done when a home is built on a property.
Quite often.
Right. And so it may not show all the improvements. It may not show pools. It may not show additional garages unless a survey was required. But less surveys are being done now. When we were first in the industry in the late 80s, surveys was a big deal. You needed a survey because that was before the days of title search. Now, if you're putting title insurance, if you're putting a pool in or you're putting a garage on, you may still want a survey done so that you can make sure your placement of things, if there isn't an existing one, is in the right place so you don't mess up.
Yeah. Now, something a little more obscure is that title insurance covers, and that is fraud against your title, which could happen after the fact. Someone could pretend they're you. It doesn't cover the identity theft and all those things, but it does cover if they put a lien on the property that wasn't yours. And so now you got this mortgage registered against your home, and they'll cover that kind of fraudulent thing against your title.
Is that guaranteed or is that a premium?
Check your policy. Some things, like if you want identity theft, you can add that as an extra on the premium on some of the insurance. So you want to check with your lawyer closely what he's buying, who he's buying it from, and what it covers.
Yeah, there's a couple of great companies. So again, this is a legal conversation with your lawyer at the time of purchase to ensure you have the right title insurance.
And we're glad we can be positioning you to build wealth wisely because it's about much more than just money.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward.